Hey YouTube, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Vegapunk. This is my first video. Hopefully there will be more in the future, but for now, please enjoy. So as stated in the title of the video, I don't believe that Luffy will reveal Gear 5th to take down Kaido. And I don't think that Awakening or a new form of Gear 4th is the key either. That's not to say that Luffy won't unlock Awakening, Gear 5th or some new form of Gear 4th in the future, just that it won't happen in this arc. Now, Luffy most likely cannot defeat Kaido as he is right now, considering that he almost certainly has an awakened form that he has yet to reveal. So this begs the question, if not Gear 5th, what then? My theory is that Oda has already set up and revealed all the pieces necessary to defeat Kaido. These are namely Ryuo, Conqueror's Coating, and Gear 4th Tank Man. This is probably quite underwhelming for the staunch Gear 5th, Awakening, and new Gear 4th form fanbases. However, I will try to convince you in this three-part video, where I first explain the setup for Haki to play an important role in the conclusion of the Yonko saga. I will then follow up with a similar argument for Gear 4th, and finally concluding with the importance of willpower and a breakdown of how the fight against Kaido will go down. So, to explain the Haki side of things, I'll briefly explain the importance of the first two arcs of the New World saga, Fishman Island and Punk Hazard, before explaining the role of the four major fights in the three major arcs so far, namely Dressrosa, Whole Cake Island, and Wano. I will skip over Zou because I don't think it holds too much relevance to the current battle. So, what was the purpose of Fishman Island and Punk Hazard? Well, that's pretty straightforward. This was to show Luffy has a complete mastery over the basics of Haki. In Fishman Island, Luffy used conquerors to knock out fodder, which in the Marineford War posed such a huge problem to him, showing that they are no longer relevant. In his later fight against Hody Jones, he is fighting in the water at a complete disadvantage, having to rely on observation Haki just to keep up with him, and armament Haki to defend himself. Even with doping, against regulations by the way, Hody Jones couldn't defeat Luffy. You might want to point out that Luffy's armament couldn't hold up against Hody Jones' sharp teeth. That's true, this is done on purpose to remind us that armament does not mean invulnerability, and introduces the possibility for growth. In the next arc, however, Oda reminds us that armament is still useful, as it helps Luffy to deal with Caesar Clown, a Logia user, previously untouchable by Luffy outside of lucky matchups and tricks. Now, in Dressrosa, we are shown that Luffy's Haki is a match for Doflamingo's both in terms of observation and conquerors. Doflamingo is the strongest opponent Luffy has had an extended fight with, while also being the weakest independent force in the New World. The only skill Luffy lags behind in is armament Haki. I'm purposefully excluding Awakening here, because Luffy matches this with his new Gear 4 form, Bound Man. It's because Luffy lacked in armament that he had to use Bound Man, it's because of Bound Man that Doflamingo was forced to reveal Awakening, and it's because Luffy still lagged behind in armament that Luffy had to reveal King Kong Gun. This doesn't help Luffy to grow, however, not noticeably at least. It simply revealed Luffy's new form, showed us its flaws, namely the time limit, and more importantly, re-exposed Luffy's weakness in armament Haki. Next, we move on to Whole Cake Island. We already know Luffy's weakness in armament and his time limit, so what does Oda do? He writes in both the perfect character and scenario for Luffy to push these to the limit. In an extended overnight fight against Cracker, he again notices his attacks aren't strong enough, so he uses Bound Man again. However, this still isn't enough, even with Nami's help. The difference this time is that now there are no innocent bystanders to worry about. It's the perfect chance for Luffy to push himself, extending his time limit and improving his armament Haki a little. Although in the end it's still not enough and Luffy uses Tank Man full version. It's very likely that Cracker himself was using invisible coating that Hyogoro talked about in Wano. This would explain why his armament is considered the strongest on the crew, the possible exception being Big Mom, although it's possible that she relies mostly on Conqueror's coating in the same way. It's my personal belief that in this fight Luffy learned to use invisible coating, and yes, I know, Cracker's armament is stronger than Katakuri's and even he was able to hurt Luffy. There are two possibilities for this. The first is that Katakuri used Haki Flow, Advanced Ryuo, or whatever you want to call it, to push his armament Haki into Luffy's body. The other possibility is that Katakuri used Conqueror's Haki to do the same thing. The problem with either of these is that Cracker was specifically stated to be the strongest in armament, and also that Oda did not show either Ryuo or Conqueror's Coating to Katakuri's attacks. This second argument can be written off as Oda simply not being ready to reveal it and that Luffy wasn't able to see it yet, so why should we? It's the same thing Oda did with Marineford after all. As for the first point, I don't really have a counter-argument, so I'll just leave it there for now. The focus of the fight with Katakuri, however, wasn't on either of these forms of Haki. Its purpose instead was to highlight the fact that Luffy also lagged far behind in observation Haki, a shortcoming which he clearly and deliberately improved over the course of their fight. Throughout Whole Cake Island, we were shown that Luffy was far from being able to take a Yonko head-on. The point of this arc was to show that Luffy was lacking in some areas, be it armament, or observation, or even his time limit, and then to bridge the gap between himself and the Yonko commanders. This fight with Katakuri accomplished this quite nicely. Of course, I am once again purposefully leaving out Awakening, because just like against Doflamingo, Luffy found his own way to close the gap in their Devon Fruit abilities, by revealing the flexibility of Gear 4th through the new Snake Man form. Now that we have been shown some of the flaws in Luffy's abilities, we move on to Wano. Here, Kaido brutally hammers in the lesson in their first encounter. Luffy is clearly and undeniably lacking in both offensive and defensive capabilities. Following this, Luffy trains to become stronger, both in physical strength and in armament Haki, and this pays off. Luffy is now able to consciously use armament as an invisible coating, protecting him from Kaido's attacks. He can now also project his armament Haki into his enemies and is thus able to harm Kaido. Now, although Luffy has both Ryuo and Future Sight down, this is still not enough for him to defeat either Big Mom or Kaido. They can simply use Conqueror's Coating to defend themselves from Luffy's attacks and simultaneously break through his defense. This is why Luffy has to improve in the one area where he is most at a disadvantage, Conqueror's Haki, and that is exactly what he has done. At this point, he has split the sky with Kaido. Oda is showing us in the most visual manner he possibly can that Luffy's use of Conqueror's Haki matches that of a Yonko. Throughout the Wano arc, Oda has gone through the list of Luffy's shortcomings and ticked them off. Observation? Check. Armament? Check. Conqueror's Haki? Check. Luffy, using everything he has shown so far, is now a match for Kaido in his hybrid form. The only thing Kaido has left to defeat Luffy is his awakened form. This is when most people expect Luffy to reveal or unlock his own awakened form, and this is where I disagree with almost everyone in the One Piece community, at least as far as I can tell. I know I glossed over Conqueror's Haki just now, and I'll get back to it later, but for now I want to explain why I believe Gear 4th is the key to defeating Kaido, and how it has been foreshadowed as far back as Dressrosa. Now that we know that Luffy already had Gear 4th figured out when entering the New World, we can see that both Fishman Island and Punk Hazard could have been a breeze for him. Things only got difficult for Luffy when he finally came face to face with Doflamingo, as he could easily tank Gear 2nd and dodge Gear 3rd, and so Luffy revealed his first Gear 4th form, Moundman. Roughly speaking, Luffy needed to be able to deal the same damage as Gear 3rd with the speed offered by Gear 2nd, and Boundman accomplishes this. When overpowered, Doflamingo uses Awakening, and now they are about evenly matched. If not for the time limit and the birdcage, Luffy could most likely have won in a drawn-out battle. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant, because the time limit is there, and so the fight must end quickly. Luffy could have used Snake Man, but the fight would drag out because it focuses more on speed and he would eventually get caught. On the other hand, while Tank Man has the power to defeat Doflamingo in a single blow, Luffy would definitely get caught. So how can Luffy overpower him without getting caught? The answer is simple. Luffy can keep flying and only use a small part of Tank Man, and with a single arm he uses King Kong Gun. The same thing happens later in Whole Cake Island, only this time it's not Cracker himself that is too tanky, but his biscuits. Luffy needs to defeat Cracker, but he can't reach him using Boundman, making King Kong Gun obsolete. He could potentially approach Cracker with the speed offered by Snake Man, but Cracker could immediately put up an unbreachable defense. He can't use Tank Man either, because it would be too slow. So Oda writes in a way for Cracker to let down his guard and approach, when Luffy is so full of food that he can't even move. This is when Oda chooses to reveal the full version of Tank Man, literally. This should set off alarm bells for you, because this is the one and only time in the series that Tank Man was shown, and Oda trolls us by having Luffy so full of food that we can't even tell what the form looks like. Later on, we are also shown that Luffy can't even put a dent in Big Mom's defense with Boundman, so she is essentially a tank. And finally, last but not least, Luffy fights Kaido one-on-one and Oda cuts away without revealing what went down. Kaido, the king of the beast, he was defeated 7 times as a pirate, caught 18 times, sentenced to death 40 times. When hanged, the rope snapped. When put under the guillotine, the blade broke. When skewered, the spears shattered. On top of that, Kaido has taken blow after blow since the battle began. He's been knocked down again and again. All 9 of the red scabbards stabbed Kaido in the chest. All 5 of the supernovas have knocked him to the ground, and he always gets back up. And when Luffy fights him one-on-one, what does Luffy do then? You guessed it, he pulls out his ultimate move, the strongest attack we've seen in the story so far. What was it again? Gomu Gomu no Worororo. After tanking such a powerful attack, what does Kaido do? He goes right on to fight Yamato like nothing happened. This attack was most likely King Kong Gun, of course. Oda just wants us to forget about Tank Man. And if you still don't believe Luffy will use Tank Man, let me ask you this. What is Kaido if not the tankiest tank in the history of tanks? He even survived Momonosuke's tasty nibble. Now, so far I've probably convinced you that Gear 4th Tank Man would be used, or already has been used against Kaido, but not necessarily that it's Tank Man specifically that would be used to defeat Kaido. First, I'll briefly summarize so that everything is fresh in your mind before moving on. In Dressrosa, we're introduced to Gear 4th Boundman as well as its time limit. Luffy overcomes this using a small part of Tank Man, King Kong Gun. Then, in Whole Cake Island, we learn about Gear 4th Snake Man, Luffy's limitations in armament and observation haki, as well as a cursed version of Tank Man. And lastly, in Wano, we're shown the additional gap in Conquerors and a redacted version of Tank Man. In a video about a year ago, Mr. Morge went into detail about why Conqueror's haki would be the focus of the Wano arc. While this ultimately turned out to be true, his theory was incomplete, and I would like to expand on it and take a look at the bigger picture. Throughout the whole of the Yonko saga, we have been beautifully misled by Oda through the hype of Luffy's gears and his opponent's awakenings. We have been led to believe that Luffy must reveal either a new form or his awakening, when in fact Oda has been working on something entirely different in plain sight. Oda has put a heavy emphasis on haki over devil fruit abilities. In every arc so far, Luffy has only shown some new ability related to his devil fruit when he absolutely had to. Instead, he has always favored his haki and used every opportunity he's come across to improve it. Luffy will not win through a new form or through awakening. Instead, he will win because his willpower is stronger. Oda will show this by having Luffy come out of Wano with a better mastery in all 3 forms of haki than even a Yonko. Luffy is clearly better in observation haki than either Big Mom or Kaido. After all, he has future sight and they don't. He is also better in armament haki, because neither Big Mom nor Kaido can penetrate their opponents with Ryuo. And finally, by the end of the arc, Luffy will be better in Conqueror's haki. The first time Luffy got knocked down by Kaido, he said he would break Luffy's spirit, and Luffy immediately responded with a show of Conquerors. Kaido says there are too many. He doesn't want more Conquerors users, because it would be unmanageable. He would have to demonstrate his strength all the time. On the other hand, Luffy doesn't care. He doesn't need to prove to others that he's strong. He knows that he is. The next time they meet, Luffy taunts Kaido for dodging his attacks. He has a confidence boost. On the other hand, Kaido gets triggered and knocks him back down again. Luffy gets up having figured something else out, and gets another boost in his confidence. Kaido asks himself how high his ceiling will go, and knocks him back down again. What does Luffy do then? Passed out and falling into the sea, he tells the Alliance that he will win. As for Kaido, his mace is starting to crack, and his confidence is starting to crumble. We learn from Rayleigh that haki is the act of not doubting, and Luffy is little by little removing all the doubts that he has. Oda has made it a point since the beginning of the story to show that willpower is more important than anything else. We can look as far back as Luffy meeting Kobe, encouraging him to pursue his dream. Against Lucci, where Luffy willed himself to stand. Even more recently, take a look at Luffy vs Katakuri. Luffy's will was so powerful that for the first time in the series an opponent gave up the fight because his will was overpowered. Now it's inevitable that Luffy's spirit, his willpower, his haki will dominate even the Yonko. All that said, there are two more requirements left before Kaido's defeat. Firstly, Luffy must show his crew that he now has the strength to protect them, and secondly, the Straw Hats must show their captain that they also have the strength to back him up. It's been played up since the beginning of the story, think Arlong Park. Luffy proudly declares that he can't do everything, but that it doesn't matter because he has friends who can do the things that he can't. In Enies Lobby, Luffy would not have gotten up if not for Usopp. And let's not forget Thriller Bark, where the whole crew teamed up to defeat Oars. Luffy relies on others on a bigger scale as well. In Punk Hazard, he relied on Law, Smoker, and Tashigi. In Dressrosa, he relied on Law again, as well as the gladiators and the citizens of Dressrosa themselves. At this point, it's not a big leap for us to assume that Luffy will rely on the people of Wano, albeit indirectly. It will also contrast nicely with Oden's relation to the Scabbards and the people of Wano, showing all of them, and more importantly Momonosuke, how a true leader should act. Luffy will most likely get knocked down one last time in front of the Alliance as a dramatic end to Act 3, where he will need protection before the final beatdown with Kaido. When Luffy gets back up for the final time, he will reveal Tank Man and Gomu Gomu no Worororo in all their glory. Luffy will show his crew that he now has the power to protect them. His crew are the only people that he needs to prove his strength to. They rely on him, and he couldn't protect them before. He failed as a captain. This team-up will be the final piece that Luffy needs to overcome the trauma of Sabaody and Marineford. Coming out of Wano, Luffy will have shown that he is equal in strength to a Yonko, but greater in spirit. Having finally earned his title as the 5th Yonko, he will be a great pirate, ready to meet Shanks. Just one step away from becoming the King of Kings, the freest man on the sea, the Pirate King. So this is why I believe that neither Gear 5th, Awakening, or a new form of Gear 4th will be used to defeat Kaido. If you liked the video, please spread the word so I can get my channel started. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.